How could I have known that accepting an invitation to my boss's house party would lead to such an unexpected turn of events? The evening had been perfectly normal until I excused myself to use the bathroom upstairs. When I pushed the door open, not realizing it wasn't locked, I froze instantly. There stood Michael, my boss, completely taken by surprise in the middle of changing his shirt. His eyes met mine in the mirror, both of us caught in a moment neither had anticipated. The sudden vulnerability in his usually confident demeanor made my heart skip. For a split second that felt like eternity, I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even apologize for barging in. Something shifted in that moment, something neither of us expected but both of us felt. His eyes, typically so professional and distant at work, held a different expression now, one I'd never seen before and one I couldn't stop thinking about afterward. I'm Olivia, 37, working as a marketing executive at Thompson and Amp, Gray for the past 4 years. After my divorce 2 years ago, I'd thrown myself into work, feeling the need to prove something, to myself, to the world, to the ghost of a marriage that had slowly withered away. Michael Thompson had been my boss for those 4 years, always professional, always distant, always just my boss. At 45, he carried an air of authority that commanded respect around the office. His salt and pepper hair and tailored suits created a persona that seemed untouchable. That was until that night at his house party, when the barriers between boss and employee suddenly became much thinner. "I'm so sorry," I stammered, quickly backing out of the bathroom. I didn't realize anyone was in here. My cheeks felt like they were on fire as I hurried down the hallway, my heart racing against my ribs. The image of Michael, standing there with his shirt unbuttoned, remained etched in my mind. I had caught glimpses of the man beneath the suit before, a flash of forearm when he rolled up his sleeves during late meetings, the outline of broad shoulders under his jacket, but never like this. Never so real. The rest of the party passed in a blur. I mingled with colleagues, laughed at jokes I barely registered, and sipped wine that I couldn't taste, all while trying desperately to act normal whenever Michael entered my field of vision. Did he notice how I couldn't quite meet his eyes? Did anyone else sense the strange tension that now vibrated between us? I doubted it. Most were too caught up in their own worlds, in office gossip and weekend plans. When the party began to wind down, I prepared my excuse to leave. I'd thank Michael for hosting, offer a casual goodbye that wouldn't hint at the awkwardness of our earlier encounter, and slip away. That was the plan. But as I was collecting my coat, Michael appeared next to me in the foyer. "Olivia," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Before you go, could I speak with you in my study for a moment? There's something about the Hendricks account I wanted to discuss." Business. Of course. This was exactly what we needed, a return to the safety of work discussions. "Sure," I replied, relieved that we'd have a neutral topic. His study was at the back of the house, away from the dwindling crowd of party guests. The room was everything I'd expect from Michael: leather-bound books, a solid oak desk, and the subtle scent of sandalwood. He closed the door behind us, and suddenly the room felt smaller. "I wanted to apologize for earlier," he said, surprising me. "I should have locked the door." "No, I should have knocked," I countered quickly. "It was my fault entirely." Michael walked around to the side of his desk, his fingers trailing along the polished wood. Still, it was awkward. "It happens," I said, attempting lightness. "Tomorrow at work, it'll be like it never happened." He studied me for a moment, his head tilted slightly. "Is that what you want, Olivia? To pretend it never happened?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't ready to examine. What was he really asking? I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, suddenly very aware of how alone we were. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said carefully. Michael moved closer, but still maintained a respectful distance. "I've always tried to keep things strictly professional between us," he said. "But I'd be lying if I said I hadn't noticed you, Olivia. Not just as an employee." My breath caught. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. The sensible part of me screamed warnings about workplace complications, power imbalances, and all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Yet underneath that, something warm and reckless stirred. Michael, You don't have to say anything, he interrupted gently. I just wanted you to know. No pressure, no expectations. If you want to forget this conversation along with what happened upstairs, we can do that. Before I could formulate a response, a knock at the door broke the moment. Michael's sister, Catherine, poked her head in. Mike, the caterers are asking about payment, she said, her eyes flicking curiously between us. I'll be right there, he replied, and she disappeared back into the hallway. Michael turned back to me with a small smile. Think about it, he said softly. That's all I ask. The following Monday at work was strange in its ordinariness. Michael conducted the morning meeting with his usual efficiency. He delegated tasks, discussed deadlines, and didn't once single me out for special attention. If anything, he seemed more distant than usual. Had I imagined the entire exchange in his study? Had I misinterpreted his words? By Wednesday, I was convinced I had. 3 days of standard workplace interactions had almost convinced me that the party had been a momentary lapse, forgotten as quickly as it had occurred. Almost, but not quite. That afternoon, Michael called me into his office to discuss the Hendricks campaign. Strictly business, his email had said. I gathered my notes and laptop, mentally preparing myself for a normal meeting with my boss. His office was brightly lit by the afternoon sun when I entered. Michael gestured to the chair across from his desk, and I sat opening my laptop. Before we get started, he said, I need your help with something. He stood and walked to a bookshelf on the far wall. There's a marketing textbook I need, red cover, about the psychology of consumer behavior. It should be on the top shelf. I followed him to the bookshelf, scanning the upper shelves. This one? I asked, pointing to a red spine. Yes, I think so, he said, stepping back. I reached up, stretching to my full height to grasp the book. As I did, I became acutely aware of Michael's gaze on me. The realization sent a flutter through my stomach. Was he creating a reason for me to reach up? The thought both thrilled and unsettled me. Sorry, he said quickly, stepping forward. I should have offered to get that for you. It's fine, I said, bringing the book down and handing it to him. Our fingers brushed in the exchange, and I felt that same electric current from the night of the party. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, we were back in his study, with unspoken words hanging between us. Thank you, he said, his voice a touch lower than usual. We returned to his desk and proceeded with the meeting. Michael was the consummate professional, offering insights and suggestions about the campaign as if nothing had happened. But something had changed. The air between us felt charged, alive with possibilities neither of us was acknowledging. As the days turned into weeks, a strange dance developed between us. On the surface, everything was business as usual. Behind that facade, there were lingering glances, moments when conversations stretched longer than necessary, and an unspoken awareness that had never existed before. Then came the Chicago conference, for days at the Grand Hotel for the annual marketing summit. The entire team was going, which meant there was safety in numbers. Until the flight cancellations hit. Bad weather had grounded half the planes, leaving only Michael and me able to make it on time for the opening day. We'll manage, Michael assured the team over a conference call. Olivia and I will handle the first day's presentations, and hopefully the rest of you can join us tomorrow. And just like that, the bubble of safety that came with having the team around us popped. It would be just Michael and me, alone in Chicago. The flight was uneventful, our conversation sticking to work topics and safe small talk. We checked into the hotel, separate rooms, of course, and agreed to meet in the lobby in an hour to head to the conference center. The presentations went well. Michael was in his element, commanding the room with his expertise and charisma. I handled my portions with what I hoped was equal professionalism, though I couldn't help but notice how often his eyes found mine in the audience when he spoke. After the day's sessions ended, we found ourselves alone in the hotel bar. One drink to celebrate a successful first day, we'd agreed. Just colleagues unwinding after work. "You were brilliant today," Michael said, raising his glass to mine. "Thank you," I replied, feeling a warmth that wasn't entirely from the compliment. "You weren't so bad yourself." He smiled, and I noticed how it reached his eyes when we weren't surrounded by the office dynamics. "We make a good team," he said. "We do," I agreed, taking another sip of my wine. "Olivia," he began, then paused, as if weighing his words carefully. "Do you ever think about that night? At my house?" The directness of the question caught me off guard. We'd been dancing around this for weeks, never quite acknowledging the undercurrent between us. Sometimes, I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. "Sometimes," he repeated, a small smile playing at his lips. "I think about it more than sometimes." My heart beat faster. We were crossing a line, or at least approaching one that had been clearly drawn in the sand between us. Boss and employee, professional boundaries. All the reasons this was complicated. "Michael," I started, not really knowing what I was going to say. His phone rang, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen and sighed. "It's the office. I should take this." I nodded, simultaneously relieved and disappointed. While he stepped away to take the call, I finished my wine, trying to gather my thoughts. What was I doing? What were we doing? When he returned, something had shifted. His professional mask was back in place. "Sorry about that," he said. "There's an issue with one of our clients that needs immediate attention. I'll have to work on it tonight." "Of course," I said, sliding off the bar stool. "I understand." We walked to the elevators together, the moment from earlier seemingly lost. When we reached my floor, I stepped out, turning to say goodnight. "Olivia," Michael said, holding the elevator door open. "What I said earlier. I meant it, but I also respect you too much to complicate things. The choice is yours." Before I could respond, he let the door close, leaving me standing alone in the hallway with his words echoing in my mind. I barely slept that night, thoughts chasing each other in endless circles. By morning, I still hadn't decided what I wanted to do, or rather, I knew what I wanted, but not what I should do. The conference continued, and soon the rest of the team arrived, creating a buffer between Michael and me. We were professional, focused on the tasks at hand, but I caught his eyes on me more than once across crowded rooms. On the final night, the conference hosted a gala dinner. I wore a deep blue dress that I'd brought without really thinking about it. Now I wondered if some part of me had known, had been preparing for this moment all along. When Michael saw me in the hotel lobby, his expression made my heart race. "You look stunning," he said simply. "Thank you," I replied, feeling unexpectedly shy. The gala was a blur of networking, speeches, and polite conversation. Throughout it all, I was hyper-aware of Michael's presence, of where he was in the room, of who he was talking to. When would we have a moment alone? Did I want a moment alone? As the evening wound down, I stepped out onto the terrace for some fresh air. The Chicago skyline sparkled before me, a tapestry of lights against the night sky. I heard the door open behind me and somehow knew it was him before I turned. "Beautiful night," Michael said, coming to stand beside me at the railing. "It is," I agreed. We stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the city. When I finally turned to him, his eyes were already on me, warm and questioning. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began. "About it being my choice." He nodded, waiting. "I'm still not sure what the right choice is," I continued honestly, "but I know what I want." Michael stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool night air. "And what is that, Olivia?" Instead of answering with words, I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his, a brief touch that ended almost as soon as it began, but left me breathless all the same. When I pulled back, Michael's eyes had darkened. He reached up, his fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough. "No," I admitted, "but I want to find out." We made our way back to his hotel room, the elevator ride a study in tension and anticipation. Once inside, with the door safely closed behind us, everything changed. He reached out, and we shared a moment of closeness neither of us expected. The feeling of his body against mine sent waves of warmth through me, awakening parts I'd forgotten existed. He paused, waiting for a signal from me before we moved closer. I nodded, and slowly, he lowered it. It felt like rediscovering something long forgotten, a rush of emotions I hadn't felt in years. As we moved together toward the bed, my heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. When I lay back, Michael paused, looking down at me with an expression that made me feel both vulnerable and powerful. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. Time seemed to blur as we learned something new about each other, something honest and vulnerable. The world narrowed down to just this room, just this moment, just us. His touch was thoughtful, as if he was taking in every moment. When we finally came together, it felt deeply emotional, like something long overdue. The next morning, I woke to find Michael watching me, his expression soft with something I wasn't ready to name. "Regrets?" he asked quietly. I considered the question, all the complications that would follow us back to reality, the office politics, the whispers if anyone found out, the potential risk to both our careers. But then I thought about how alive I felt in his arms, how seen. "No," I answered truthfully, "but I do have questions." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Like what? Like, where do we go from here? How do we navigate this back in the real world?" I asked, voicing the concerns that had briefly surfaced before being swept away in the night. Michael's fingers traced patterns on my shoulder, sending shivers down my spine. "One day at a time," he said. "If this is what we both want, we'll find a way." It wasn't a solution, not really. But as I nestled closer to him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against my cheek, I realized it was enough for now. We would return to the office, to meetings and deadlines and professional facades. But underneath it all would be this new current, this secret knowledge of each other. Would it be worth it? Could something that began with such an accidental glimpse grow into something real, something lasting? Only time would tell, but for the first time in years, I was excited to find out. Have you ever had a moment that completely changed how you saw someone you thought you knew?
This is an artistic and fictional creation intended for both entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or events is purely coincidental. Some scenes and dialogues in the video are part of a dramatized performance and incorporate elements of grotesque, satire, and exaggeration. The creator stands against discrimination, violence, and hatred. This channel fully complies with YouTube's policies and does not infringe upon copyright laws.